Assalamualaikum. A very good afternoon to all our participants today. I'm Kasma, Secretary from MOGEC, and I will be the host for today's webinar. On behalf of MOGEC Council members, I would like to extend a very welcome to all participants to this MOGEC webinar titled Ensuring Optimum Production with Nova Suite, which will be presented by Engineer Rafil Elyas from East101. I would like to say thank you Engineer Rafil for accepting our invitation to present today. Today's webinar will be using Team Live event. We encourage participants to send your questions at the Q&A chat box. Please state your name and your organization when submitting your questions. To begin our webinar today, I will let President of MOGEC, Engineer Rashid, to deliver his opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Kasma. Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon to everybody who is here today. Welcome to another MOGEC webinar. Some of you may notice that we have been very active during this past few months. We've had quite a number of webinars that we have organized. And I must highlight that today's live event comes with 1.5 approved CPD hours, so please take note of that. Today, after many attempts, we have finally managed to get IR Rafil Elyas to engage with us, been presenting his paper entitling Ensuring Optimum Production with Nova Suite. Many of you may already know IR Rafil is the founding principal engineer of East101, a boutique firm providing specialist process engineering and flow assurance consultancy. I worked with him before when I was with another company, especially in the compressor studies aspect of doing EPC work. I'm very pleased to say that his reputation precedes him. He's one of the one of the few brilliant minds that we have within the Malaysian oil and gas and petrochemical industry. As far as I'm concerned, his work is at par, if not better, with many international technical consultants related to process engineering. I'm also pleased to say that he has been a very strong MOGEC supporter since MOGEC was founded many years ago. My hope that he will continue to use MOGEC as a platform to share his expertise, and we look forward to listening to his presentation today and welcoming him again in many more webinars in the coming future. So with that, I pass this webinar back to our Secretariat, Madam Kasma. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rashid. Thank you, Rashid, for the opening remarks. Okay, to kick off the webinar, I would like to introduce our speaker, Engineer Rafil Elyas, the founding principal engineer of East101 Sdn Bhd, a specialist process engineering and flow assurance consultancy company. He has 30 years work experience using the developing dynamic transient simulation software for design and operations, namely transient pipeline analysis, liquid and slug management, mitigation, wax management, mitigation, compressor, surge protection, plant operability and control optimization. He's currently an industrial advisor and adjunct lecturer for several universities in Malaysia, as well as registered professional engineer with the Board of Engineers Malaysia, a chartered engineer and a fellow of the Institution of Chemical Engineers, ICHEMI, also the Institution of Engineers Malaysia, IEM. Engineer Rafil, are you ready?
Yep, I'm good. Thank you very much, Shama.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Shama, and thank you. I'd like to thank MOGEC for inviting me for this, and I'd like to thank Encik Rashid for the very kind introduction, and I'm very sure I'm not worthy of a lot of the praise that he had articulated early on. But thank you very much for the very kind words. So today I'm going to be talking about a software application suite called the Nova Suite. And I think as a lot of people know me, I've been in the software and simulation business for quite a while, for about 30 years. And I've been doing that for a long time, and that's pretty much what I know. So I've got a very narrow skill set, and it generally happens to be within the simulation and software area. So I always tell people if I wasn't doing this for a living, I'd be flipping hamburgers. I think I'm better doing this. I'm a better simulation guy than a short order cook. So thank goodness that I can still get some gainful employment for the time being. So without further ado, let me just jump into this real quick. So with regards to today's agenda, I'll give a bit of an introduction and talk a bit about what this Nova suite of software applications is. I think right now, if you're an oil and gas practitioner, if you're upstream, you've probably been using some form of simulation software or simulation tools, and there's pretty much a universe of applications and a whole lot of different companies that you can acquire these simulation technologies and tools from. So I'll talk a bit about what this Nova suite of applications is. And then I'll talk a bit about looking at new ways to design and operate facilities and how this kind of fits into the workflow. And I'm going to finish by talking about how some of the applications in this suite can be leveraged for a digital oil field, which I think is on everyone's mind these days. Whether you're an operator, like a big time operator, like a Petronas or Shell or Exxon, or whether you're looking at small fields and small wells like GX Nippon or some of the smaller operators. So we'll take a look at how we can use this for digital oil field type applications. Then we'll open the floor to question and answer. Before I go on, can everyone hear me okay? Because I'm just on this cheap microphone. Is the audio okay? Okay. Okay, so there is a lot of pressure to reduce capital and operational expenditure and to reduce risk, quantify profits, provide business KPIs. If we take a look at the amount of deep water, say for example, production, where deep water is hydrocarbon production is getting more and more challenging over time, and we're having to go to deep water production. The amount of hydrocarbon production activities tend to get a lot more challenging over time. And within our business arsenal, simulation software and simulation tools are one of the things that we use to sort of reduce the risks and quantify profits for this. So there's a lot of pressure to reduce these capex and opex, and what we've envisioned is a lot of times when we're taking a look at different types of strategies or evaluating different types of operating procedures or technologies, we tend to find that simulation plays an important part of that. Yeah, so a lot of innovation in the field, in the hydrocarbon production and processing, is driven by the use of mathematical models or simulation. So if we consider how simulation is used in the life cycle of an asset, typically we take a look at the new opportunities, and within these new opportunities, we typically would have to look at performing feasibility studies, doing conceptual designs. These are the kinds of things that we would be addressing at this phase of an asset development. So this might be some form of like conceptual study, feasibility study, or pre-feed. So based on this, we would have to start quantifying how much is it going to cost for us to develop this particular opportunity in terms of the assets that we have to construct. So normally in these phases, you'll have to do some kind of a computation, plus minus 40-50%. Yeah. After that, if we're in the oil and gas business, we'd be going into front-end engineering design. If you're downstream, you go into basic design. And at this state, we would essentially be performing some kind of a computation to take a look at equipment parameters, roughly equipment sizing. If you're upstream, then we'd be taking a look at field layouts, pipeline routing, pipeline sizes, etc., taking into account all the different types of flow challenges that we would see. So there would be this type of computation at this phase of the asset. Yeah. Once we get some preliminary information, this will allow us to perform some computations within plus minus about 20-30%. Again, estimate. And at every phase, we'll be taking a look at costs and benefits. Yeah. After this, after the front-end engineering phase, we would typically go into detailed design, where we would come up with more specific information, and we start taking a look at the equipment list. We'll start taking a look at equipment suppliers, equipment vendors, pipeline companies, etc. From a computational perspective, at this point, you would have more information in terms of the process and in terms of the physical structure that you are anticipating around this process. So if this was a topside facility, this is when you start getting all of your isometrics in place, your arrangements, isometrics in place, piping, you know how much distance there would be between equipment. If this was a field, you'd have an idea of where you would be placing all your wells and where your what sort of like interfield pipelines you'd be having in place. Yeah. So this particular stage is generally when a lot of us start seeing the use of dynamic simulation, because this is when you start having more equipment definitions in place. When you have more definitions in place, then it makes sense to take a look at process response. When you know how much piping there is, when you know how much volumes there are, then you know how slow or fast things will happen in the field. Yeah. You go into construction, and I think some of you here work in the construction area. From our perspective, for flow assurance and process, there is also some sort of support that needs to be provided at the construction phase. So you'll still find process and flow assurance coming in and providing support at this particular phase of the asset. Say, for example, if you're constructing an asset, say if this is maybe a brownfield, and you're taking a look at pipeline or piping routing, you've got like a full pipe bank and you need to do some additional rerouting, which was not anticipated earlier on. On the fly, you might have to have some process analysis, process support put into place at this particular phase. At this phase also, if you're taking a look at upstream development, this is when you might start taking a look at drilling campaigns, when essentially how you're going to schedule them and essentially how you're going to execute them. Yeah. Startup, you'd be looking at essentially troubleshooting your facilities or pipelines. You'd be looking at how to start the pipelines. Are you going to essentially have to do some thermal management? Are hydrates an issue or wax an issue? And things like that. So there would be some kind of activities required at the startup of the facility. Once you're operating, if you've managed to get your operations at a stable or a fully developed rate, if you're looking at the flows, then you would then shift your attention to performance monitoring, troubleshooting, optimization, planning. Various types of operational concerns would be addressed at this phase. Over time, as you start operating a facility, you start having opportunities maybe to bring on new wells or to perhaps supply to new markets. You might be looking at revamping, debottlenecking, or extending the capabilities of your facilities. Yeah, so you might be doing like debottlenecking studies, what if studies, etc. And then come decline, you might have to be performing decommissioning studies, or in the case of, let's say if you've got an FPSO, you might want to move your FPSO from one field to another. So you might want to be taking a look at retrofitting your FPSO to accommodate a new field and new fluids. So at all stages of this asset life cycle, there will always be some form of computation and simulation required. Yeah, so we can't get away from that. We always need some form of mathematical models in our business arsenal to address all of these requirements. Yeah. So simulation tools are used very extensively because primarily what they do is they provide quantitative insight and interrelationships between variables. Yeah. So this understanding of interrelationships, interdependencies allow us to understand, manage, and optimize our assets. Yeah. Essentially, what it does is it gives us almost like a transparent pipeline or a transparent plot, so we can actually see what is happening down at the molecular level in many cases. So when I say see, I mean in quotation marks, for us to get a full understanding of this. And this is important when we're actually designing our facilities or when we're making decisions. As engineers, everything that we do has to have some kind of a numerical or quantitative or physics-based justification. So a lot of times we've started using these mathematical models for this. Now, in the past, I sometimes one of the things I do is I teach simulation classes, and I was very fortunate to be invited to this group called the John Campbell Group, and they do a lot of downstream gas processing training. And I'm very fortunate to I was very fortunate to be associated with these guys because most of the instructors are in their late 60s or late 70s in age, and these guys have been around for decades. And they were around practicing since the 1960s in the pre-computing era. Yeah, so these guys were designing facilities, doing field development computations, tuning controllers without using any computers at all. So they relied on charts and books and experience and gut feel. These days, a lot of that has been replaced by software. And what the software has done is it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because sometimes we have people who use software who don't really understand what the software is, how it's supposed to be used. But if it's when used properly, what software does is it gives us a consistent framework for us to apply our ideas and allow us to investigate different types of strategies in a fairly consistent and communicatable framework. Yeah. Example, I build something in HYSYS, I send it to you. You know HYSYS, you know the basis. We're using Peng Robinson. You're also using Peng Robinson. It's okay. I've got like a non-polar components. So we understand each other and we're able to communicate these numbers clearly. Or I'm using like a pipe sim to represent like a pipe, say pipe holdup. I pass it to you. You know, you're both familiar with the software. We're both familiar with the software, so we're able to communicate these ideas clearly. Yeah. So software is these days, packaged software has become very, very important, and everyone uses it. Yeah. When I was in university, we didn't have packaged software, and the professors will always warn us, always be suspicious of software that you didn't write yourself. Yeah, he never trusted any software unless he never trusted any calculation unless he calculated himself. But this day that's not this day and age, that's not the case. We rely on the fact that software companies or software offerings have gone through some form of validation and checks before they go out the door. So it's almost like a standard kind of communication environment. So that's one of the things that I guess we're looking at implementing with this particular type of software suite called NovaFlow. Yeah. So again, as I mentioned, the software allows us to communicate these ideas and allow us to deploy plans and gain insight, so we can where there's no surprises. We can avoid unnecessary costs or unwanted phenomena or exceptions. So I'd like to now go into this suite of applications called the Nova Suite. And this is developed by a group called the Nova Flow, the Nova Flow LLC company, and they're based in the States. So we're working with some of our partners. They're essentially providing the software, and we're taking a look at that, and we're kind of evaluating this application to see whether it's something that we can deploy. The thing that interested me in this, and I'm going to make a statement which I think is probably going to be maybe a divisive statement for those people who are working in computational type fluid flow calculations. What attracted me to this suite of applications is the way that they were approaching the hydraulic computations. Yeah. If we take a look out there and we look at the various types of hydraulic calculations that happen in pipelines, if you're a steady state user, if you're using HYSYS or you're using PipeSim, steady state applications, you have like a range. If you call up a pipeline object, a pipe object, you have various ways that you can define how you want the hydraulic pressure drop and holdups to calculate. So everything ranging from empirical correlations like a Beggs and Brill, Gregory Aziz. These are applications. These are routines which are empirically determined, meaning from lab experiments, various lab experiments. People plotted flow regimes, flow patterns, and based on that applied certain type of hydraulic computations based on the various flow regimes. Yeah, so this is based a lot on experimental results from if it's a Beggs and Brill, for example, water, air, kind of two-phase flows, yeah, in loops. Then you start getting more sophisticated, what they call mechanistic models, unified or mechanistic models. Like the Tulsa University Fluid Flow program, Tufts, or the Olga mechanistic models, where a lot of work has been put in to look at actual physics, to have more of a physics-based representation, a mechanistic and physics-based representation of what is going on. So we've got these sort of empirical models, and we've got these physics-based models to work with. Now, as a company that does flow assurance as one of our services, I think a lot of myself and probably a lot of my other friends, competitors, or others who are working in the flow assurance world have certain applications which we use over and over again, like leader flow or Olga, which are based on some kind of first principle method. Here's the thing about first principle and mechanistic models. They're trying to represent fluid mechanics, yeah? So if I take a look at fluid mechanics, and let's put fluid mechanics aside for the time being. So I'm a chemical engineer. So as a chemical engineer, I work with different types of phenomena. For facilities work, I work primarily based on steady state modeling, or sometimes dynamic modeling for steady state, for like a topside facility, or for like a gas plant, or for a refinery. For these kinds of systems, a lot of times chemical engineers or process engineers rely on thermodynamic equilibrium-based models. So what these models are they're actually based on steady state conditions and equilibrium conditions. Yeah, you can move from one state to the other by changing temperature and pressure. You go from one temperature and pressure to another temperature and pressure instantaneously. There's no representation of how it goes from one state to the other. So these are thermodynamic steady state representations. And it's a very special class of problems. And we use that to generate heat material balances. And sometimes we can tweak those models to make them run dynamic simulation models. Yeah. Now, most of the types of problems that we're doing in facilities can be addressed using thermodynamic equilibrium steady state representations. That is one class of problems. Pipelines and upstream. The contribution of thermodynamics in steady state, when we're taking a look at certain types of phenomena, no longer governs. Yeah. Now, if I look at like a pipeline operating normally at fully developed flow, like a nice, well-behaved pipeline which is not slugging, yeah, maybe I can take a look at a representation of that using a steady-state model. But a lot of time, this isn't the case. So because of the fact that fluid, in the case of a pipeline, it's a fluid flow-based phenomena, yeah, fluid mechanics-based phenomena. The equilibrium, thermodynamic equilibrium contribution is not that much governing compared to the fluid mechanics aspect, yeah. And this is where your thermodynamic models, steady-state models break down. So a lot of companies, which primarily have come out of the SINTEF group. So these are organizations like before, like SPT, which is now within Schlumberger, or the group that had the SINTEF group. I guess they also came up with like LeaderFlow, which is now owned by Kongsberg. A lot of these organizations had come up with physics-based models, trying to add and had added on a lot of physics-based mechanistic phenomena, Navier-Stokes kind of phenomena, very complicated and high-resolution physics, with the hopes of capturing behaviors. Now, I tend to find that it's a very I think it's a very interesting approach, and it's been a very useful approach. And I've spent a lot of time working on projects using these particular tools, some of them very successfully. But at the end of the day, fluid mechanics is so complicated that it is impossible to identify and numerically articulate all the various phenomena that are taking place. So when you take a look at running a case either in LeaderFlow or Olga or anything like that, you don't just do one single run and say, that's my answer. You do a range of runs. Why? Because the actual representation is never going to be 100% what you're going to see in the field. There are so many different factors that contribute to fluid mechanics, which you can never hope to capture accurately in a single mathematical model, particularly a single one-dimensional mathematical model. Now, that's one thing that we need to remember. A lot of these tools that we're using are one-dimensional or radial model. Yeah. So at the end of the day, even though we throw a lot of physics at this, and I have a lot of friends who are in research or doing a lot of work in this particular area, even though you throw a lot of physics into it, at the end of the day, you still can't say that you have that kind of resolution accuracy that you hope to have. So what happens, as in any other case, any other kind of engineering analysis, is you take a look at operating envelopes. You do many different cases, yeah, and you come up with a solution space to make your decision. So you end up having to do a lot of runs. Why do we do a lot of runs in our engineering computations? Is because of the fact that we have uncertainty. So we can't get exact numbers, so we perturb variables and we get operating ranges, and then we make our decisions based on that. So at the end of the day, I still have to run these perturbations and get these envelopes. Yeah. So when one of the things that I found is when we're using these very rigorous fluid flow based models, run times tend to be limiting. Yeah. So all of these projects, any project, if we get issued a project and we ask them what's the deadline, they say, well, deadline was like last week. So we need to be able to run stuff fast. Lots of runs, lots of investigative type runs. And it's sometimes this is not very easy with the current set of tools that we're looking at. And that's what attracted me to this NovaFlow and these Nova suites. So they are approaching a hydraulics in terms of with a very novel, I wouldn't say novel because this is a very old school way of looking at things. It's called the drift flux representation. And we believe that the claim is that the drift flux model that they're working with, it's actually a modified drift flux model. I'm not going to get into the history of the drift flux mechanism, but suffice to say it's a hydraulic model. They've made some modifications based on some work by Bhagwan and Gajar to add some empirical adjustments or fixes to the 1970s drift flux model to make it more representative of various types of flow regimes. Yeah. So we were reading about this, and apparently we can get some of the representations I saw have like fairly similar results to some of these more rigorous first principle-ish fluid mechanics or physics-based representations. And that attracted us, yeah, because at the end of the day, we need to run a lot of cases. And then at the end of the day, I'm still going to be using my engineering know-how and my engineering intuition to make certain decisions. So I would appreciate something that can give me a lot of a nice operating envelope, which would allow me to make these decisions quickly. Yeah. So that's what attracted us to this Nova suite of applications, which is based on this drift flux representation. Yeah. So this group, the NovaFlow group, which produces this Nova suite of applications, is all these applications are based on this transient modeling approach. So there's just enough physics to give you some kind of a representation. What do I mean by just enough physics? So let me just go back again. Sometimes I forget this is a MOGEC and it's not iChemie, and sometimes I get a bit into a chemical engineering kind of thing, and I start talking about thermo and all that. But just bear with me. If you've used HYSYS or if you're a process engineer, you are familiar with this concept of equations of state, like the Peng-Robinson or SRK. And it's a very interesting representation of pressure, volume, temperature relationships of a gas. Yeah, starts off from ideal gas law, PV equals to nRT. Yeah, and the problem with PV equals to nRT is if your temperature is very, very low, this equation fails. Why? If your temperature gets very low, you start liquefying, and then your volume can actually go to zero. So the equation predicts that your volume disappears, and that's ridiculous. So sometime in the 1800s, or is it 1700s, or even earlier, Van der Waal came in and added some molecular phenomena to this, an attraction term and a repulsion term. Yeah. So this is based, a lot of the cubic equation of state, Peng-Robinson, are based on a bit of just enough representation to tell you what happens to gas when you subject it to temperature and pressure. And Van der Waal came and added these two parameters which tell you that, okay, if I squish it really, really, really close, the volume doesn't go to zero because I can't squish molecules to zero volume. Yeah. And it tells you that molecules have like interaction. So this is an analogy that I'm saying. It's not an actual physics-based model where you model the force field of the molecules and you bring them together. No, it's based on a bulk perspective, but it's got some tuning parameters to let you get a reasonable amount of work, reasonable numbers. And we've been using these kinds of representations to build plants and facilities since the 1970s. Yeah, so that's what kind of attracted me to this sort of drift flux model. I saw that it had enough physics to give me an idea of two-phase behavior, and it gave sufficient tuning parameters to let me tune it sufficiently based on some dimensionless properties that I've identified. Yeah. So as at some point in time, I think this group will probably be looking at potential beta testers for the software. So I'm sure they'll be looking at offering this to the oil and gas community. But the interesting thing is this suite of applications is based on this. It's a fast computation, so it allows us to do transient simulations with a high real-time factor, meaning like very, very fast. I can run a lot of case studies quickly, and it also combines. What we're looking at is combining some of these tuning parameters that we can use there with machine learning models on top to sort of self-tune these models appropriately. So if you're a big organization like Petronas or Shell or Exxon, and you've got a whole bunch of data in your data historian information stored away, this would be a great time to kind of leverage that information to see if we can come up with specific tuning parameters for the hydraulic behavior in all your various pipelines. Yeah. So it's combining this sort of physics with just enough physics with tuning parameters and machine learning to guide the tuning of these parameters. Yeah. So that's one of the ideas of this. Yeah. So what does this Nova suite of applications consist of? Well, the first is Nova Drill. So let me preface this up front. I'm not a driller, so I might represent the discipline of drilling badly. So if I do, and if I am, then don't be shy to chuck something in the chat line saying that, hey, stick to processes and molecules or something. But the Nova Drill is one of the applications that's coming out of Nova Suite. And it came up because I think there was like a requirement in a company in Asia where they wanted to come up with like a real-time drilling monitoring center. Yeah, so whenever they do a drilling campaign, they want to have this sort of like a shadow drill happening, this virtual drill or shadow drill happening. So then if they have some problems, immediately they can turn to these shadow models and use that to kind of troubleshoot. So if I have a sudden gas kick happening over here, then I can use my model to take a look at different kinds of strategies. So it'd be kind of like a twin, a digital twin of a drill. So a lot of times, I guess we look at drilling software, and most of the drilling software out there, I'm not saying all, but I think quite a bit tends to be based on steady state drilling models. And a lot of the tools, I know that there are some tools which are multi-phase transient, yeah. But a lot of the tools out there, some of them are not able to model important transient phenomena like well kick, and sometimes there tends to be an effort to rerun when the inputs have changed for this. So a lot of the drilling applications, when I say they're not really transient, I should be detailed. What I mean is they're dynamic, but they're kind of based on pseudo steady state approximations, and there are some limitations for that. Yeah. So the thing is, Nova Drill has been designed from ground up because we noticed that there's this need for having to have a model, a shadow, or run in real time to predict what might happen and to allow us to test out various strategies to compensate if there are any exceptions or issues. Yeah. So this is one part of the application, Nova Drill. The next is Nova Flow or Nova Flow Pipe, and this is essentially looking at the multi-phase fluid flow in a pipe. So if we take a look at a traditional transient multi-phase one-dimensional models that are out there, there tends to be a steep learning curve. And as I have articulated earlier, there's been a lot of effort to add a lot of physics, or to add more representations of the Navier-Stokes equations in, which kind of result in fairly slow runs, because it's so complicated. It takes a long time to run, and we find that, you know, there's like a point of diminishing returns. You add more resolution, more mechanistic reality, but your returns don't really improve so much. Yeah. So there needs to be flow assurance models that are easier to use, which allow you to run faster than real time, quickly and automatically self-tune. This is important because one thing I mentioned, which we need to take into account these days, is project schedules are getting more and more aggressive. Yeah. Resources are getting lower. Everyone is being more competitive. We need to be able to adapt quickly. We need to have some agility in our design. So steady state, for steady state types of analysis, no problem. Steady state calculations happen really fast. Transient analyses are generally the bottleneck. Yeah, and that's one of the things that sometimes we get limited by. I mean, there's so much you can do with overnight batch runs or weekend batch runs, but we still need to have a way to be able to visualize our solution space quickly so that we can adapt more agile in a more agile manner. So I'm sure you've all been in a project which looks like the following. I get some initial production data or predictions from petroleum engineering or reservoir engineering. So this is my production profile. This is my gas oil ratio. And I start designing things. I design my pipeline. I design my facility. I calculate all of my set points based on this production profile and this GOR. And I'm using this for front-end engineering design. And as I go into detailed design, something has changed. Why? Because things are always changing in the field for whatever reason. Now I can't access these wells. I'm looking at bringing in some other wells. Or I have another opportunity. I can bring in some additional I have some additional hydrocarbon storage resource, and I want to pull these wells in. So now I want to increase my throughput, and my GOR has changed. So you need to do a new set of runs. And by this time, you're getting into detailed design, and things must happen faster. So we need to have faster computations and faster representations of our solution space. Yeah. So that is a NovaFlow, a pipeline, transient pipeline type application. So now I'd like to talk about NovaFlow Online. So another particular area that we have is, I guess, what's known these days as digital oil field. Yeah, and there are many types of applications that are out there, and we've used and supported many different types of tools. Everything from, I mean, I've seen tools like 4Gas for gas field management, production, and optimization. Yeah, various types of back blending, back allocation applications used by various operating companies. And one of the things that we found when we're working with these kinds of sort of oil field type applications is a lot of times information exists in silos. You have data from OFM, you have data from various types of reports. They're all over the place. A lot of the mitigation that happens, or a lot of the activities tend to be reactive, and there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of estimates. Yeah. So what we need and what we're addressing with the NovaFlow Online is essentially a repository of these network models where we have essentially consistent sources of information, and we're able to do some predictive planning and optimization on this. So I'll go into talk a bit about detail on how this what this looks like. Yeah, I think with regards to drilling and transient fluid flow, I think people have a clearer picture on this, because these are more like module application-based tools. The online application is more of a systems-based activity. So I'll go into the next part of the slide. I'll talk a bit about in a bit more detail on how the InnovaFlow online works. Yeah. Okay. So I think everyone's been talking about IR 4.0, and I think it means different things to different people. So what we're looking at this point in time is, with IR 4.0, we're looking at essentially leveraging information in an intelligent manner, getting information within the real time and leveraging that quickly across the board. Yeah. So we're looking at essentially having a consistent source of information for decision making. We're taking a look, in our case here, machine learning based tuning and representation and self-correction of models. And we're looking at this happening in real time. So with regards to Nova Suite, we're looking at essentially leveraging all of this information within one environment. Yeah. So what we're looking at over here is a kind of aligned with the IR 4.0 pillars, the three of the pillars, which are essentially simulation, systems integration, big data, and analytics, which is kind of a buzzword. I think big data and analytics is probably one of the more popular words that have been out within the past 5 years. I think back in the 1980s, this was just called applied statistics, and data scientists were essentially applied statisticians. So now it sounds a lot fancier, but it's good for all the mathematicians out there. When you go and study math back in the 80s, people say, "Hey, what are you going to do when you graduate?" So I don't know. I'll work. I'll do some stats. Now you can say you'll be a data scientist. So that's a whole new career for those studying applied statistics in math departments. What we're looking at in this particular case, again, this is looking at a new way to design and operate your facilities. We're looking at these models, as I mentioned, updated based on field data. And the way we're envisioning it, because these models are updated all the time, that operations can use it for day-to-day troubleshooting. And at the same time, you can also deploy these models to contractors to make sure that the models that they're working with are consistent. So this is based, ultimately, all of this, we're looking at a cloud-based solution. So you can manage and you can assign permissions to these models for various people to use. You can create accounts. Yeah. So if let's say you're an oil and gas operator, like a big oil and gas operator, you've got all of this data in Pi. You can start using it to tune your models. Have those tuned models sitting on the cloud. Your operations team can use it. If let's say you're outsourcing some of, you've got some brownfield work, you'd like another organization to start taking a look at sizing or debottlenecking, you can assign some permissions and allow these a third party to access that. Of course, there's going to be a lot of cybersecurity that one needs to set up, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to know that I know how all of that works at this point in time. But we've got an IT group who are familiar with all of these types of activities. Yeah. So essentially, what these models allow is they'll allow us to collaborate a lot easier within various groups, operations, project with external parties, and it's going to allow for rapid innovation, rapid technology innovation to take place. And we have these sort of collaborative environments. Yeah. Okay, so let me jump real quick into digital oil field applications with NovaFlow. So this is kind of what it's going to look like so far. Yeah. So this is essentially going to be like a cloud-based application. So when I say cloud, there's I guess many ways that one can deploy a cloud. One would be like a public cloud, like Google Documents or things like that, where anyone can log in. Or if you're like a very large organization, if you've got your own oil and gas net, company net, you could place this on one server and then deploy this to all of your users. So it's a cloud, but it's within your particular network. And the nice thing about cloud applications is it takes away the cost of ownership for a lot of your users. Right now, if you want to run like a sophisticated piece of software, you need to buy like a high-powered computer, and you need to manage all the different version controls and everything, the different versions and patches, etc. And that can be a real pain, and you need to have your IT group manage that, yeah, and you spend a lot of money on hardware. So now I think everyone's moving to the cloud. So it's not a new thing, right? I mean, for some of us here, I can see some of you guys here probably came from the 1980s and the 1970s, and a lot of us in school, when we were in uni, we used mainframes and we used dumb terminals. So it looks like it's going back to that model again, where you have everything in a mainframe or a cloud, and you're essentially working with low power, thin clients to interface with your computational engine. So I think everything is circular. Fashion, computing, all goes back. Yeah, I'm just hoping that flare pants don't come back again. So when we have a lot of with availability of data on data historians, so a lot of organizations are using tools like a Pi, or if you're an Aspen house, you'd be using like IP21, or if you're a Honeywell user, you'd be using something like PhD. What a NovaFlow Online will allow you to do is you can do things like monitor your wells, optimize your production. Yeah. What we're looking at is essentially tracking and visualizing your well performance in real time, making sure that we'll show up another slide where we can actually see what this means. But it's obviously interesting to know where you're operating and what is the implication of your operating point. Yeah. So you always want to make sure that you can understand or determine where your well production envelopes are, safe operating envelopes, optimum operating envelopes, and make sure that you're operating within these limits. Yeah. And you also want to be able to identify well underperformance. Yeah. You want to be able to optimize your production. So you want to be able to put up together case studies. Yeah, do what-if studies, do feasibility studies, take a look at different operating envelopes, take a look at a solution space rapidly. And you want to be able to identify potential optimum production strategies. Yeah, and this can be done using the NFO optimizer. So the visualizer framework kind of looks, this is just a couple of screen snaps. Yeah, trends, data analysis. This is the operating envelopes that I was talking about. So in this case, I've got essentially some safe operating limits in this red line. I've got my optimum limit within this purple line. And these might be my operating points. And that's my optimum point. So these limits might come from various sources. Your optimum limit might come from a computation. So NovaFlow also has the well tubing model in place, so you can calculate what your optimum limits, what your optimum limit is going to be. Your safety limit might come from the field advice. Yeah. So all of these can be implemented within this particular view, so you always know where you're at. And you'll essentially be exchanging information with your data center. So if you've got stuff in Pi, then it'll be stored in Pi. And then we'll have an optimizer layer, which will allow you then to run your case studies and to essentially calculate your optimum points. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this is roughly the structure and how it's going to be set up. Yeah, so we've essentially got a database information stored in the database, optimization and a visualization layer in place. Yeah, so the information that we're looking at might come from Pi. Some of the data sources might come from OFM or some other kind of database. We'll essentially have like a pre and post processor and essentially all the various types of plugs and APIs. Again, at this point in time, this is something our IT group does. So I'm not going to pretend to know the right structure for this. But if you're interested, give me a shout. I can get our IT guys to kind of articulate this in a more intelligent manner. But essentially, this would be the rough structure, architectural structure for this layout. This would be one potential structure. Yeah. So this is what I mentioned with regards to the operating limits. Yeah. So this would be one example of a potential view. Yeah. We could also come up with like various monitoring and surveillance reports. So we can essentially color code reports. We can put this essentially on your screen, or we can trigger messages or notifications, either emails or now everything's on mobile type applications. So we can whip up little apps as clients to receive this on your application on your mobile device. Yeah. So this essentially is allows you to monitor your facility a lot closer, and this interface is customizable. Yeah, so this is something as a first pass I kind of put together, but we can have it in a much more visually pleasing user experience. Now there's UI and UX. I'm the worst person to design UI and UX because I'm happy just using keywords and text. So I have a different group which looks at proper ergonomics and presentation. But this can all be customized into like a proper aesthetics and an ergonomic structure. Yeah. Yeah, you can have like views kind of just to tell you if you're within the safety limit or within your optimum conditions. We can use this for optimization. So based on your current conditions, we can read your current conditions and then calculate some horizons for perhaps where you might want to be. Yeah, and then kind of publish these horizons to you. So based on your flowing tubing head pressure, your current CGR, you might have like a pressure flow model, which has been based on your well test. We can put in the constraints and come up with some kind of an optimized production horizon. Yeah. So this is kind of based on a lot of small projects that I've done over the years, back from the 90s in my old hypertech days, where we were deploying optimizers for RSA and all these other facilities. A lot of it's kind of a culmination of technology that was developed along the lines. It's not a lot of these technologies are not very new. A lot of them we had seen already, particularly with the big data analytics, neural net AI back in the 90s. But in the 90s, we didn't have a widespread use of data historians, and computers were very expensive. CPUs were expensive, memory was expensive, and you didn't have all the parallel processing that you have now, because a lot of this AI and machine learning algorithms, they're essentially they're just brute force. They're just running many calculations very quickly. So they're nowadays, when we've got multi-core CPUs and multi-CPU machines, we can parallelize a lot of computations, so things can happen a lot quicker. Yeah. So it's essentially the hardware has caught up with a lot of the scientific and the mathematical theory that's been around since the 1960s and 1970s. Yeah. What if studies in optimizations? This is an interesting activity as well. So say, for example, in this particular case, I've got like 3 wellheads going into one central processing platform. Yeah, Alpha, Beta, Bravo, and Charlie, and they're feeding in. Let's say in this case, everything is up and running, and I've got my production at a certain rate. What would happen if wellhead platform Alpha trips? Yeah, what am I going to do? Well, I still need to try and meet my nominated flow rates. Do I have enough? In my can wellhead platforms Bravo and Charlie compensate? Yeah, do I have enough ullage in my pipeline to cover for this? Yeah. What scenario 2 is what happens if wellhead Bravo is down. Yeah. So in each of these cases, what would be the optimum choke setting, or how should I be operating my wells? So in this example, I can perform this computation, this optimization computation very quickly. So these are some of the examples. Yeah, for scenario 1 where everything is operating, these are the choke settings. For scenario 2, I'm assuming platform Alpha has gone offline, and I'm trying to compensate with these other wells. Scenario 3, Bravo is online, so I've got compensation from Alpha and Charlie. So it's we're compensating while taking into account the hydraulic behavior of the interfield pipelines as well. So this is one of the activities we can look at from these particular models. Yeah. Another thing that we would be looking at is also production forecasting. In this case, where we can take a look at field data to calculate certain derived variables, for example, like efficiencies. So this would be more for topside facilities. Yeah. So if I take a look at the processing efficiency of a topside facility in terms of the dehydration, compressors, etc. These are some of the activities that we can look at representing within this digital oil field solution. Yeah. So with regards to the NovaFlow online application, some of the key values that we have this with data is we can essentially take a look at getting a handle on the operating efficiency and accurately identifying potential areas for operations improvement or enhancement, for decision support, yeah, data management, and production optimization. Our facilities, production technologists, and platform managers. Yeah. Okay, that's all I have for now. If you've got any inquiries, you can contact my sales manager, Mr. Lee Zi Huang. That's his contact detail over there, and that's our email. Or you can always contact MOGEC. As Rashid has mentioned early on, I think you can claim 1.5 hours of CPD points. So that's the reference for this. Yeah.
Yes.
So we've got like a feedback form, a QR code for a feedback form. If you've got any questions, I'll open the floor to any Q&A at this point. So thank you very much again for having me.
We have 2 questions.
Okay.
Let me read the 2 questions come from Mr. Stuart Mushet. First question is, What is the impact of the digital oil field example, Nova Suite, on the requirement for instrumentation, both surface and downhole?
Sorry, could you please repeat that, Engineer Nazreen?
What is the impact of the digital oil field, example, Nova Suite, on the requirement for instrumentation, both surface and downhole?
That's a very good question. What we would have to take a look at is for digital oil field, we're obviously going to require measurements, and those measurements are going to come in at depending on the application at certain frequencies, sampling frequencies. If I phrase it in the following way, in some cases, we've been using digital oil field to compensate for the lack of instrumentation. For example, when we're looking at production allocation, we don't have flows, we don't have readings on the various phase flow rates coming out of each wellhead. In fact, what we're doing is we're essentially deriving this number from the pressure and the test separator data to kind of back calculate and back allocate. Yeah, that in that case, what we're doing is we're using this one aspect of digital oil field to compensate for the lack of instrumentation. In some cases, for some of the implementations that we're looking at, it would be from what I have been seeing in terms of existing instrumentation. Most of the applications that we are looking at now can rely on existing instruments. However, we would probably want to revisit the data capture rates for this. Yeah, I can't tell you specifically what would need to be added in terms of instrumentation without actually looking at the exact function or the actual aspect of the digital oil field that we're looking at. When the application that I was describing, the NovaFlow online and digital oil field implementation, I would say I'm kind of using it as a bit of a broad strokes term over here. In the tool that we're describing earlier, I was looking at implementing the NovaFlow online to take a look at safe operating limits and optimum operating limits for wellheads. In that case, we're actually able to conduct those kinds of models just based on a lot of the existing instrumentation that we have in place. That is a pressure, wellhead pressure, and a test separator data for back allocation. Yeah, but I think you asked a very good question, and it would really depend on ultimately what aspect of the oil field we'd be looking at and what sort of resolution there is. I'd obviously be very happy to engage you in a separate discussion about this if you've got some specifics in mind. Yeah.
Okay, second question also from Stuart. Has Nova Suite been used live? And if so, how complex a system has been studied?
Okay, so at this point in time, Nova Suite is still under development. The Nova Flow Online, we've deployed various components of this over the years. So some of the sort of optimization in terms of choke position optimization, that is something that we've deployed. That's something that I deployed a long time back, and that's one of the components that's in the NovaFlow suite. But the actual suite itself has not been released. So this is currently under development, and at this point in time, the NovaFlow, my NovaFlow associates partners are looking for people, organizations that might be interested in sort of beta testing or working together as perhaps development partners for this application. So we've not actually deployed any of this in real time. At this point in time, NovaFlow development is done, and the team are benchmarking this against some field data. So I suspect by the end of the year, the NovaFlow transient multi-phase application should start being available. NovaDrill, I think they've worked on the penetration and the mud pumping aspect, single-phase mud pumping aspect of that, and currently they're taking a look at the gas kick function. So I would suspect that a beta or an alpha, pre-alpha or alpha version should come out maybe before the end of the year. So it's not something that's out as yet. If you'd like more information about this, please shoot us an email or let MOGEC know, and they can communicate with us.
Okay, we have a third question from Stuart. One issue may be the digitization of historic data and ensuring its quality. It would be easy to start from now, but we would lose a lot of historic data. Maybe you need some 70s engineers who are used to evaluating data.
You know, Stuart, you raised a really good point. And that's what I was mentioning, that a lot of times, a lot of people who are doing this big data analytics, machine learning and big data scientists can't operate on their own. They need to be operating with domain experts. So the domain expertise component has to be in. So people like yourselves or other process petroleum engineers, oil and gas engineers need to contribute to this particular area, and it's actually really critical. And this is something that I'm telling a lot of my friends whose kids are going off to uni and saying that they want to be data scientists. I say that that's great, but at the end of the day, it might be a better idea to let them take up like a discipline like engineering or science, and then learn this data science on the side. And I guess it's going to be a very divisive statement. But in our organization, we've got the guy that's running our data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence is an engineer by training who's picked up all of these tools on the side. So what you've brought up is really that's a very interesting statement, because you can't just rely on the data as it is. You're going to need a domain expert to come in and start treating that data and putting context along that data. Yeah. So when let me just give an example of one of the jobs that we worked on. We were taking a look, and this is a downstream activity where we were looking at a sour water stripper. And in this particular situation, a sour water stripper had been operating for quite some time. And it was found that some of the trays had buckled. There had been like some mechanical damage to this facility. And we had hypothesized that it might be due to the fact that, you know, sour water strippers essentially boiling steam, yeah, going through all the various stages or the packing. We hypothesized that there could be a situation where that steam could have come into contact with cold temperature. So that could be from maybe like a subcooled water feed into the system, or some liquid water feed into the system at various stages, and that could have caused like a localized area of condensation, which might cause like a localized area of vacuum, and that could have caused this mechanical damage. So we hypothesized that, and one of the things that we said is, okay, let's take a look at the pressure data. So we had pressure data over like a huge range of there's a huge range of data over many months. And the problem is, what we thought is maybe we could use some of the data visualization, the big data analytics tools, to identify blips where we might see some sort of trends which might point to pressure fluctuations or temperature fluctuations which might give rise to this. And interestingly enough, we didn't see anything. And it's not for the fact that there wasn't, I don't think it was a bad idea. It was just that fact that the data wasn't good. Well, was it, that was one of the things, maybe the data wasn't good, maybe there was too much noise. But another thing that we noticed was that the sampling frequency probably would not be enough to capture that kind of phenomena. So it's always important to have a domain expert come in and set up these models. So the first question you ask is, how much instrumentation are you going to need for this? I said, well, we'd have to take a look at this at the system and then identify if this is a new facility and we want to have this new facility friendly to big data and analytics. Maybe we could take that into account and then figure out where all of this instrumentation should be. But also when we're putting together the databases, we might either consider having a separate database to monitor for intelligent, for like a machine learning and AI, engine on to be running like a working database in conjunction with your Pi publishing database, analogous to the way that they have separate databases for APC, Advanced Process Control. So that might be that might be something necessary. I think in one of the pictures I had shown that we had this separate working database running at night. So that might have a higher frequency or more customized frequency, different from the data collection that you would have. So I can envision that these are some of the things that would have to be addressed if we really wanted to set up these models.
Okay, that's the last of the questions that we have received.
Is Stuart the only one asking questions?
Yeah. But yeah, then that's the question we have on today.
Well, thanks for keeping me on my toes, Stuart, and thanks for logging in. I appreciate that. I can't wait for this to be over so we can start having our song events and our face-to-face events and catch up with everyone.
True. Okay. All right. I think thank you, Engineer Rafil, for answering the questions. Thank you, Stuart, for the questions. Thank you again, Engineer Rafil, for presenting your talk. Then participant before you leave the webinar, I hope that you can scan the QR code for the feedback form. Cik Rashid, is there anything you want to add up?
No, I just like to once again thank IR Rafil, because usually when I hear process engineers speak, it always feels like trying to drink water from a high pressure fire water hose. But you put it very well. At least I can understand most of it. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you.
And I hope you will come back again and share with us many more work that you do in our industry.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Once again, thank you all participants for participating in our webinar. We really appreciate. I look forward to seeing all of you for our next event. Stay safe. Wassalam, and thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Engineer Rafil.
Take care all. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.
Take care. Stay safe.
Bye.